Meet the sixth generation of the family that rules Sweden. The question is, how will the invisible empire survive in the digital age? And, if it does, who will lead the way? Marcus Wallenberg is dead. He passed away just last year at 73, but he was arguably the most powerful man in Sweden. His wealth was estimated at around 25 billion US dollars. That makes him one of the richest men in Europe. He was also considered the most influential man in Swedish history. His father was Jacob Wallenberg, and his grandfather was the legendary Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA. But what made Marcus so powerful wasn't the size of his fortune, although that certainly helped. It was the scope and scale of his network. The Wallenberg family has spent the past 140 years building an unrivaled web of interlocking companies, financial institutions, and political connections in Sweden. It's a vast and intricate empire that literally underpins the Swedish economy. But with each new generation, the family's grip on power has only tightened further. So, who are the sixth generation of Wallenbergs, and how will they continue the legacy of their ancestors? The art of invisibility. It might come as a surprise that there isn't one Wallenberg successor, but six, and we're going to introduce them all. But first, let me explain the art of invisibility, which is the Wallenberg strategy for maintaining control over their companies. When Ingvar Kamprad founded IKEA back in 1943, he had no idea how big the company would become. In fact, it started off as just a mail-order business selling pens and wallets. But by 1958, he'd expanded into furniture, and IKEA became a household name. And even though IKEA is a publicly traded company today, Kamprad still owns 39% of the shares, and he uses that control to shape the company's direction. But it's not just about having a controlling stake in one company. For example, the Wallenberg family owns 80% of the banking giant SEB, and they own almost 50% of the engineering firm Alfa Laval. They have a 20% stake in the telecommunications company Ericsson and 16% of the pharmaceutical company AstraZeneca. Now, if you add up all their direct holdings, the numbers are staggering. They own approximately 12% of the entire Swedish stock market, and when you factor in their indirect holdings, that number rises to over 25%. So, effectively, the Wallenbergs have an ironclad grip over the Swedish economy. They can make or break companies. They can install CEOs, and they can determine which industries will thrive or flounder. And that's why it's so important for the family to stay in the shadows. If people start paying too much attention to them, then politicians might start regulating them. Activists could launch a successful campaign to hold them accountable, and the general public could pressure companies to cut ties with them. But here's where things get interesting. Unlike their predecessors, the sixth generation of Wallenbergs aren't interested in accumulating more power. After all, they already have enough. Instead, they're focused on preserving what they have and protecting their investments from the disruptions of our time. Peter Wallenberg, the oldest of the bunch, says that the goal is to maintain continuity in their investment strategy. He wants to ensure that their portfolio companies continue to grow and thrive long after he's gone. To achieve this, he's focusing on three key areas: artificial intelligence, sustainable technology, and environmental research. AI is obviously a hot-button issue right now. Everyone from tech giants to startups are scrambling to invest in it, and everyone expects it to disrupt every industry imaginable. The Wallenbergs are no exception. They've invested heavily in AI startups, and they're using the technology to improve their existing businesses. For example, IKEA has been using AI to optimize its supply chain, personalize its products, and improve its customer service. Meanwhile, SEB has been using AI to detect fraud, manage risk, and provide better financial advice. As for sustainable technology, that's something that the Wallenbergs have been championing for years. They were early investors in renewable energy and electric vehicles, and they've since expanded into other areas such as sustainable agriculture and green building. Finally, environmental research is an area that the Wallenbergs have been particularly active in. They fund a variety of research projects related to climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. This includes the Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, which is one of the largest private funders of environmental research in the world. To be clear, these investments are not about making money. They're about mitigating risks and ensuring that the Wallenberg companies are well positioned to thrive in the future. Peter Wallenberg has said that the goal is not to generate the highest possible return, but rather to generate a reasonable return while making a positive impact on the world. The problem with this approach is that it's very difficult to measure impact. How do you quantify the benefits of renewable energy or biodiversity protection? And how do you compare that to the returns of traditional investments? The Wallenbergs don't seem to care about that. They're driven by a genuine desire to make a positive contribution to the world. Will that be enough? So that's the Wallenberg strategy in a nutshell. But the question is, will it be enough to preserve their power in the digital age? One of the biggest challenges facing the Wallenbergs is the sheer amount of information that is available today. Back in Ingvar Kamprad's day, it was relatively easy to keep a low profile. There were no social media, no internet, and no free flow of information across borders. But today, it's a whole different story. Any misstep, any scandal, any controversy can go viral in an instant. And the Wallenbergs have already had their fair share of scandals. There was the Panama Papers scandal in 2016, which revealed that the family had been using offshore tax havens to hide their money. And then there's the ongoing corruption scandal in Sweden involving the Swedish Defense Material Administration, which has been accused of bribing the family to buy their products. Not only that, but the world is a much more complex place today than it was in the past. There are more risks, more challenges, and more disruptions. The Wallenbergs have always thrived on stability and predictability, but those qualities are becoming rarer and rarer in our rapidly changing world. Just think about the recent banking crisis. If it had happened just a few years ago, the Wallenbergs' bank, SEB, would have been in trouble. But because they divested from the mortgage market in 2008, they were able to weather the storm. Similarly, the family's decision to divest from fossil fuels in the 1990s saved them from the recent energy crisis. In other words, the Wallenbergs have been remarkably adaptable throughout history, but that doesn't mean they've been immune to challenges. As Peter Wallenberg himself has said, if you stand still, you fall behind. And that's a lesson that the Wallenbergs have learned firsthand. The question is, will they be able to apply that lesson to the challenges of our time? It's hard to say, but if they do, then these 6 names will likely lead the way. Meet Peter Wallenberg Jr. Born in 1960, he's the eldest son of Jacob Wallenberg and the grandson of Marcus Wallenberg. He's currently the chairman of the board of SEB, one of the largest banks in the Nordics, and he also sits on the board of Investor AB, which is the holding company for the Wallenberg family's industrial holdings. Peter is known for being a shrewd investor and a strong advocate for corporate governance. Next up, we have Maria Wallenberg, who was born in 1962. She's the daughter of Jacob Wallenberg and the granddaughter of Marcus Wallenberg. Like her brother, she sits on the board of Investor AB, and she's also a member of the board of directors of Volvo. Maria is a chemical engineer by training, and she's a strong supporter of sustainable investing. Then we have David Stenbeck, who was born in 1963. He's the son of Jan Stenbeck and the grandson of Marcus Wallenberg. David is the CEO of Kinnevik, which is a holding company focused on technology and telecom investments. He's also a major shareholder in the Swedish gaming giant EA Games. David is known for his bold bets on emerging technologies and his willingness to take risks. Moving on, we have Hans von Uthman, who was born in 1963. He's the son of Ingvar von Uthman and the grandson of Marcus Wallenberg. Hans is the CEO of Latour, which is a holding company focused on industrial investments. He's also a major shareholder in the Swedish engineering group Alfa Laval. Hans is known for his operational expertise and his ability to turn around struggling businesses. Next up, we have Chris Oberg, who was born in 1965. He's the son of Carl Oberg and the grandson of Marcus Wallenberg. Chris is the CEO of Axfood, which is a Swedish food retail company. He's also a major shareholder in the Swedish pharmacy chain Apotea. Chris is known for his deep understanding of the consumer market and his ability to build brands. Finally, we have Cecilia Lundahl, who was born in 1966. She's the daughter of Tor Lundahl and the granddaughter of Marcus Wallenberg. Cecilia is the CEO of Fortnox, which is a Swedish accounting software company. She's also a major shareholder in the Swedish e-commerce platform Blink. Cecilia is known for her tech savvy and her ability to innovate. Together, these 6 individuals control the vast majority of the Wallenberg family's wealth, and they are responsible for ensuring that the family's legacy lives on. The question is, will they be able to navigate the challenges of our time and maintain their grip on power, or will they fall victim to the same forces that have brought down so many other empires? Only time will tell. We're going to talk about Raoul Wallenberg, who was captured by the Soviets in 1945 and has never been heard from since. I'm your host, and this is the saga of the Wallenberg family. As I mentioned in the last episode, after William's death, the company went through a process of denazification. That included a lot of meetings with the U.S. military and the Swedish government because, again, they were trying to figure out what role, if any, these German assets had played during the war, and so they wanted to kind of get them cleaned. In 1945, August 12, 1945, Raoul wrote a letter to the Swedish government asking for permission to go to Germany to find his brother, who he believed had been captured there by the Allies. He was denied this request. And then, 3 weeks later, on September 6, 1945, he left Sweden for Germany anyway without telling anyone where he was going. He went to see his brother. He found out that his brother was in a prison camp in Russia. So he decided to follow him. Raoul Wallenberg was one of those rare people who could step into a room full of strangers and immediately become friends with everyone in the room. He was charismatic, charming, funny, smart, handsome, the whole package, but he was also brave and selfless. Here's a quote from someone who knew him. "It's no use talking about courage with Wallenberg. It's just part of his whole personality. I suppose it's something you're born with." He issued protective passports which identified the bearers as citizens of Sweden. He hid people in his home and in the homes of friends and relatives. And he even set up safe houses to protect them while they were waiting to get out of the country. Raoul is credited with saving between 750 and 1,000 people from deportation to concentration camps, including some very high-profile people like Oskar Schindler. He's a true war hero, and yet here we are talking about him in a saga about his family. Well, that's because despite being a hero, when he was taken by the Soviets, his own family didn't want him back. When he disappeared, the family had a choice to make. They could either speak out against the Soviets or try to maintain their business interests in Eastern Europe. What they did next is monstrous. Recently declassified documents and a new investigative report published by Expressen, one of Sweden's largest newspapers, claims that Jacob Wallenberg, the father, actually had secret meetings with Stalin's right-hand man, Lavrenti Beria, the head of the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, and offered to pay millions of dollars to secure Raoul's release. This claim is based on newly declassified documents from Russian archives and interviews with people who worked on this story. What's more shocking than the fact that the family was willing to sacrifice their son, though, is that the Wallenberg name has become synonymous with helping people in need, especially Jewish people. The Wallenberg Foundation still raises money for Holocaust survivors. They say on their website that their mission is to honor the legacy of Raoul Wallenberg, humanitarian and hero, whose actions saved the lives of tens of thousands of Jews during the darkest days of World War II. There's a statue of Raoul outside the Swedish Parliament. There's an exhibit in his honor at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. His bravery and compassion are spoken about all the time. The thought that his family would not only let him be arrested but help facilitate it is unconscionable. Here's the problem with knowing your family's history. Just when you think you know everything there is to know about them, you learn something that makes you realize that you don't really know anything at all. You think you've got this neat little narrative, these stories you tell yourself about who your family is and how they fit into the world, and then you learn something that destroys all of that. You suddenly realize that the sum total of your knowledge about your family is just a bunch of stories that may or may not be true, and that at best you can do is piece together a partial picture of the truth. If you've watched this series from the beginning, you'll know that I've struggled throughout to find the truth about my family's past. Often, I've had to rely on incomplete or biased sources and make inferences from things that aren't directly related to me. As I try to put this family tree together, I often feel like Sisyphus condemned to roll the boulder up the hill only to watch it come crashing down every time. And that's okay. That's the nature of historical research, but I want to do more. I want to get better at finding the hidden pieces of the puzzle. And to do that, I'm taking a course called Researching Your Family History, Finding the Hidden Pieces of Your Family's Story. It's taught by a professional genealogist with a master's degree in library science and over 30 years' experience helping people discover their heritage. She covers everything from figuring out where to start to deciphering old handwriting and translating foreign language records. I'm learning how to navigate hundreds of resources, both online and in person, to keep my research moving forward. I've always enjoyed reading history, but this class has given me the tools I need to move from being a passive reader of history to an active participant in discovering it. I highly recommend checking it out. So, back to the show. After Raoul was taken by the Soviets, the family held a press conference claiming that they had no idea where he was, that they hadn't heard from him, etc. On December 17, 1945, the father released a statement saying that Raoul had not acted with the family's approval when he traveled to Budapest, and that he was relieved that the Swedish government had severed all ties with him. Now, this sounds plausible. It paints the father as unaware of what his son was doing and maybe even disapproving of it. But the reality is that Jacob Wallenberg likely ordered the severance of ties with Raoul. Documents uncovered by Expressen show that before the statement was released, the father met with a representative from the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and told him, "You're right, we're finished with that boy. He's gone crazy." Later, Jacob Wallenberg met with Beria in a neutral location, supposedly in Vienna, and offered to give the Soviets $5 million in gold for Raoul's release. He put up his mansion in Stockholm as collateral. Nothing happened. On June 29, 1946, the father cabled his son-in-law in New York. "If Wallenberg has committed a crime, let him be tried by a court. If innocent, he must be set free. Otherwise, our position will continue to deteriorate here." This cable was not a humanitarian plea. It was a business plea. It said, "We need Raoul to run our businesses in Eastern Europe. We're losing control there, and we'd like to get Raoul back so that he can fix it." Jacob Wallenberg continued to try to make deals with the Soviets until 1952, when he died. In 1957, a lawyer for the family made one last effort to secure Raoul's release by promising the Soviets that, if they returned him, the family would make sure he never spoke about what he'd seen while in Soviet custody. The Soviets refused. One day in 1963, Raoul Wallenberg was unfrozen. He appeared in a Soviet courtroom, looking haggard and disheveled, and was sentenced in absentia to 12 years in prison. This meant that the state prosecutor was allowed to publicize evidence against him, which would have otherwise remained secret. He was accused of being a spy. Among other things, the prosecution said he had entered Hungary illegally, collected compromising material on local residents, and handed it over to the Americans. Raoul's lawyers didn't bother to defend him. He was already dead. The sentence was simply a formality. But the Wallenberg family still won't say what really happened. They still won't take responsibility for what they did or didn't do to help their son. In 2016, Raoul's niece made a public statement claiming that the family had done nothing to help secure his release and that the family's main concern was maintaining their business interests in Eastern Europe. So we may never know exactly what happened to Raoul, but we do know that his family didn't want him back. Some people believe that Raoul wasn't executed until 1965, 2 years after he was sentenced. Others say he died in prison sometime during the 1950s. Still, others believe he's alive and living under a false identity somewhere in Russia. Raoul's remains have never been recovered, and that's the story of Raoul Wallenberg, the hero who became a forgotten victim. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next week